Lastly, if you have any questions during the session, I encourage you to ask them as they come up. You can send those over to me by selecting the Q&A button on your screen and inputting those into the window. Our team will be responding to questions in real time. Secondly, please note that you will have access to this session on demand through the conference portal for the next year. And finally, this session has been closed captioned. You can turn on this feature in the bottom right corner of the media player. Surrey School District is located 30 minutes outside of Vancouver in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. We would like to acknowledge the shared, unceded traditional territory of the Katzie, Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and other Coast Salish people on which we work, learn, and play. The largest employer in Surrey, and with a budget of over $750 million annually, we are home to 13,000 staff and 75,000 students, and we're growing at a rate of over 1,000 students per year. Our 130 schools are home to a diverse population that comes to us from all over the world, speaking close to 200 dialects and languages. We are honored to share our Office 365 learning journey with you today. So we're thrilled to be here from Surrey, and I'm just going to get our panelists to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Mandeep.
Hi, my name is Mandeep Rai, and I teach grade 6-7 at Westerman Elementary.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Aber. I'm the principal of Acole Woodward Hill Elementary in Surrey.
My name is Dan Turner. I'm the Director of Information Management Services with the Surrey School District.
So I think when you think of Surrey, you think about an innovative culture, and one that allows people to risk take, and that we appreciate the fact that we learn from those successes and sometimes the mistakes. And so I think a lot of that comes from our superintendent, Jordan Tinney, and the license that he's really given school leaders and teachers to go off to explore. And when I think about some of the initiatives, Office 365 would be the latest one, but when I think about when we made transitions to going gradeless in our communicating student learning, and then opening the door to teachers exploring the use of digital portfolios to communicate that student learning. These are all things that were at the time outside the box, outside of ministry guidelines. And we were really just given license to go off, to be thoughtful, but to explore, to consult with our communities, and to try to look at how we can do things differently, but also how we can improve what our current practice looked like. And so when Office 365 came along, it was yet another step forward in terms of us looking at how we can do our work more effectively, how we can harness these tools to collaborate. And it just aligns with how we are in our district of Surrey, and that is forward thinking, always looking to ask that question, how can we make the teaching and learning experience better for our teachers and our students?
I go back to that piece that Antonio was talking to, just around the values of risk-taking. And I just think that from an administrator's point of view, it's just really refreshing to be able to have that permission to take those risks and to be told that's okay. And so leading the school staff in that way in our initiatives, it was so important, I feel, for me to start by taking those risks first, and to show the potential of Office 365 to increase efficiency and just communication in a different way, and to get those kind of creative juices flowing of educators within the building to say, how can I use this in my classroom? And so I think that was a really key piece. So for us, it was just at Woodward Hill, we're a LEED school, so we're an environmentally sustainable school. And so using paper is a big no-no. And so this was perfect in the sense that we could really take this to the next level, to put our calendar online, to put all schedules online, making them editable so that we could basically change everything there. Any sign-up schedule, playground supervision, anything. It just really helped make that seamless. And then the other big piece was Flipgrid. That was a huge piece for us within the school, where during assemblies, I modeled that risk-taking in front of everybody by having a live Flipgrid that students could join and communicate directly with the principal based on whatever we were talking about at that assembly. So a huge moment for us to take a risk and to see it be successful, and then bring that out of that, a lot of questions from staff, like, can you tell me more about this? And then being invited into their classroom to use it more. So it was huge for us to be able to take that risk first.
One of the primary goals of the IT group to ensure that you can really think about technology in Surrey like you think about the lights, like you think about the heating, and it's a utility and it should just always just work. And so it's been really inspiring to see that we're talking less about the technology and more about some of the great ideas that you guys are walking us through here in terms of what's actually possible with the network that we have, whether it be at school or at students' homes. So it may sound pedantic, but for any school district sort of that's about to start this journey, you do need to be focused in on some of the particular details. We know that the experience with Office 365 and the rich tools we're talking about is enhanced by ensuring something as simple as your operating system is up to the very latest version and your browser that you're using is up to the very latest version. So not super exciting, but it is a critical success item towards ensuring that things work the way they're supposed to work. So.
As other jurisdictions go down the road of implementation, they reach out to Surrey because it has been successful here, and they ask the question, how did you get to the point where you are? And as we reflect back, Dan and I have had lots of conversations about the origins of this, and it was really around, I think, some key decisions that we made around where to begin, like what are our starting points. And for us, like as a school principal, I continue to know that if you are not staying current, the bus leaves the station very, very quickly, and then you're left catching up. So professional development is ultra important to educators and classrooms. But if principals are going to be lead learners, it's really important that they come alongside teachers so they can provide that leadership. And so that's where we started. We started with empowering our school-based administrators. We took them to the Microsoft headquarters in downtown Vancouver. So super thankful for that partnership. And we just started to invest in them. And that looked like 2 days the first year, looked like 4 days the second year. And really after the April of 2018 initial sessions, that fall, that's when we started to get the avalanche of requests. As administrators went back to schools, they started to model the use of these tools to, again, we're going to use that word innovation, and I maybe should not be using it as much because it's overused, but innovation has to be something that's different, but something that's better. And so if you cannot show that people's work can be improved or made more efficient, then it will fail like any other initiative that fails to do that, right? So that's what I think principals in Surrey did a great job of doing, of bringing the message back to their schools, starting to model these things, and then teachers started to ask the question, can we get in on that? And so then that started a flood of lunch and learns, and we decided very intentionally not to do district-based large one-off events. To honor our first people's principles of learning, that just like all learners, adult learners need time, and we need to be patient with them for them to find things that are meaningful for them, find their access points, and then, yes, let's go visit them, and let's do it in a social way over lunch, and then let's come back for session 2, and then let's come back for session 3, and each time finding the intersections, which was really important. We started to ask, where are our learners? Where are our teachers? What do they want to learn? What do they want to accomplish with the Office tools? And then I think that that's really what led to a lot of our success, is because we are being responsive. As teachers are in the classroom with children, we were responsive to our adult learners, and not just sharing with them what we think they need, but actually trying to empower them in areas that they told us they wanted to get better at. So I think that those were some of the key things that we focused on and that led to success in Surrey with Office 365 deployment. So Mandeep, I know I had the real honor and privilege to visit your school, Westerman, quite a few times doing lunch and learns and developing our what we called Office 365 student ninjas maybe you can talk about that a little bit. But what did the experience feel like for you in terms of this relatively new tool, Office 365, and how it was rolled out, and maybe your perspective as a teacher at one of our elementary schools?
Of course. So at the school level, I noticed an increased engagement almost immediately after our first Lunch and Learn. This is when you and other members from the district level came, and you either were invited or you came on your own for sessions on how to access the Office 365 tools. And even though it was voluntary, the majority of the staff attended because we were looking for pragmatic solutions. And teachers came out of these Lunch and Learns not only more confident that they could replicate their professional development, but also felt less anxious knowing that there was now a network of colleagues at their school who could support them. We also appreciated the follow-up sessions to help answer more of our questions and to share our individual progress that we were making in our classrooms. As a grade 6-7 teacher in the classroom, my learning of the Office 365 tools began when I noticed an increased buzz on social media platforms and the online educator communities. So I quickly realized how user-friendly the platform was, and my students and I, we all started learning and exploring the tools together. And I love how my students can access their learning from any device, which does eliminate the need for flash drives. It sounds quite simple, but as a teacher, that's one less thing I need to worry about. Office 365 has made student learning accessible for all learners from any place. With the addition of Lunch and Learns in the school, a handful of teachers simultaneously began to invite you or other district level members into our classrooms for sessions to work with our students using some of the Office 365 tools. Then our students became well-versed in many of the applications such as Teams and Sway during these classroom sessions. So now we have Office 365 leaders who could model and guide the learning of others at the admin level, at the teacher level, and as you mentioned, our Office 365 student ninjas. So all around, we started having a group of leaders that could support anyone, no matter how far along they were with their Office 365 learning.
And I think, Mandeep, a really important part of that work was, I felt after 2 or 3 sessions, there was always somebody on staff whose capacity got built to a point where you don't need me anymore, which is really exciting. Like we talk about that with education assistants, and the moment your student doesn't need you anymore, you've done your job, right? Because you've built their capacity to be independent. And so that happened a lot with Office 365, and evidenced by you and by other colleagues. And I really also want to touch on what we focused on early on, which was practical applications. So things that we did, such as using video within Teams to do like a mystery number Skype with another school, and then leaving and telling teachers, by the way, you can go back to your class right now and use Teams video, and you have a colleague somewhere in the district, and you could have a mystery number Skype with them like this afternoon. And so I think people loved that they could use it right away. We did focus on OneDrive. I spent almost the first session just focused on OneDrive and why it's so important to make sure that files are securely stored somewhere on Canadian soil. And then when you talk to teachers around making sure that the experience is great for all kids that are new to the country, kids who can't read, kids who can't write. And then you talk about the adaptive technology features like dictation and immersive reader, and they leave, there's the why for them, right? And so if you don't start with why and you just go like, this is what it is and this is how it works, but you miss the why step, then I think you're backtracking a lot. And so I think because most of our training, in fact, all of our training started with the why and compelling whys, teachers go like, technology might not be my thing. I'm a little bit uncomfortable, but it's worth trying to learn this for my students. And I think inherently what makes teachers special is the fact that, even if things are hard, if you convince them this is good for your kids, they'll do it. So I think that those are all parts of the recipe in Surrey.
I think for us, it was really about me modeling these tools in staff meetings, as well as the assemblies. But also, actually, a huge one for us was the newsletter. So that monthly newsletter, and having to do that painful task of putting it all together and what's it going to look like. And I was always looking for years for a platform that would satisfy what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring a window into the school. I wanted the parents to have that way to see what was happening in the school. And so when I was introduced to Sway, when we went downtown and I saw that for the first time, I was on it all night, learning how to use it right away, what I could do with it. And I think the power for me was that video, the ability to add video and pictures and tell a story from within was huge for me. And so starting right away to use it at assemblies, being able to film something and immediately start uploading it while I was already filming something else. And when we sent that first one out to parents and staff, right away it was, this is cool. What are you using? And right there, it was like, okay, here come the conversations with staff. Well, you can use this too. And what was really great about that was then that professional development that Mandeep was just mentioning was our next Pro D that we had. Staff wanted to know more about this platform and just some of the different tools. And so, Antonio, you and your team came in and did a mystery Skype, but that morning we had also looked at the accessibility features of Sway and of Office 365 in general. And so that was a huge eye-opener for many staff. The dictate button for students that have written output issues, the immersive reader, just cleaning up the screen, showing the power of an app like Office Lens and how you can take something like a recipe, on a busy page and completely take all of the busyness out of it and just make it about the text. And then, of course, it then being able to read to you, such a huge thing for kids. I think that's so powerful. And so I think that those are just really important tools that our staff have embraced. And then, of course, with the diversity of Surrey as well, Translate has been a huge add-on. And I've had a couple of staff mention that to me, that, we have new students that are coming from different countries from around the world, and they're able to immediately go into learning, because if the teacher takes what they're doing, or even the education assistant takes what you're doing and puts it into one of those documents that can be translated, that student is immediately able to engage in the learning regardless of the language, and the teacher using Translate can then understand what they're demonstrating back. It's just a game changer in my opinion.
Tasting Jif peanut butter.
What in the world?
Is like tasting peanut butter for the first time.
Come on!
Every time.
Sweet peanut!
Original Jif peanut butter. Over 1,300 quality peanuts in every jar.
Okay, so Dan, tell us about, the first time you said, nut butter moment, can you explain that? Because what David just talked about was that's the expression I get. Like every time I'd go to see a staff, it'd be like, show them this, and their jaws drop. Like, I can't believe that. And then the next time you go, you show them the next thing. And it's like they've used Office 365 for the first time, every time. So maybe you could talk about the nut butter commercial.
Holy Nut Butter commercial and the relevance to our Office 365 deployment is that Antonio and I go back a few years in terms of the beginnings of getting ready for cloud technologies, and specifically Office 365. And Antonio, with his naturally curious mindset, was always asking a lot of questions about it, and was the first person I think that I'm aware of that really dove deep into the capabilities of Office 365 on a consistent and regular basis. And from there, was regularly in my office with a very, very high level of excitement, and explain this new feature, a new capability, a new button that had showed up on a screen that wasn't there before. And for some reason, it just took me back to decades to this peanut butter commercial where the fellow is, as you have seen, tasting peanut butter for the very first time, but multiple times in a row. So this happened enough on a weekly basis that it became part of our vernacular and part of our kind of humor in terms of enjoying not only the commercial but also the Office 365 platform and the continuous nature of the way Microsoft is rolling out new features based on user voices and community input and prioritization. So that's a little bit of the background on that part of our Surrey story.
And it's still happening, right? That's the thing.
Still happening.
And it's still happening. So we still have the nut butter moments.
So David, as you know, in Surrey, we refer to a huge part of our vision is referred to as learning by design. So can you take a few minutes and talk to us about how that vision found expression in our Office 365 deployment?
Yeah, so the learning by design framework that we use in Surrey has 3 pillars to it. There's learning, tools, and structures. So if we go look at learning first and foremost, it's just basically saying that our students learn in different ways, and they need different ways to demonstrate that learning too. So it's really honoring the multiple intelligence of learning, and they need tools in order to demonstrate that learning. And so the tools are the educator's responsibility of looking for different ways to help students feel successful in demonstrating their learning and also just learning in general. And so I think Office 365 has been monumental in demonstrating tools that we can use digitally to support learners. So again, I just go back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, which is the accessibility tools, just being allowed to have someone that has written output issues that is able to use dictate, to be able to speak in multiple languages. At Woodward Hill, we are a dual track school of French and English. And so for a student to be able to dictate in French is a huge thing for us here, but also obviously in English too, to be able to demonstrate your learning in that way. It helps the child feel successful. And then our support staff can follow up with them to work on other things that come with writing. Going back and looking at what's been typed for them. Immersive Reader is another great example of that. But it's also about looking for ways to engage kids in different ways. So one of the things that's come out of remote learning, since we've been in remote learning, I think of 2 stories that were really powerful for me. The first one being that when remote learning first started, we were really trying to focus on building connection and getting the kids connected, obviously in a different way. And a colleague of mine was telling a story at their school where they were having great difficulty in getting the grade 6s and 7s to buy into this remote learning and getting them to do anything in the way of connecting with the teacher. So what the vice principal did there is he actually just emailed everybody and basically said, we're going to do a Minecraft club. And the response was immediate. He had those grade 6s and 7s hooked, and he started getting them into Teams, getting them to learn how to use Teams through having fun. There was that platform and that way of accessibility into learning again. And obviously Minecraft is a huge way that you can learn and build things and tell a story. And he just used it to basically get them into connecting. And from there, then it became, okay, there's your carrot. Here's the deal. You need to do some work now. And we need to get you learning again in different ways. And so the agreement going forward was, we'll do this club, but we also need you to do what the teacher is asking you to do in connecting. So that was huge. The other piece that came out of this was that, as I said earlier, it's that whoa butter experience where you're just like, teachers are saying to themselves, okay, I can look at, if I take something like Microsoft Stream, for example, I can actually record myself doing a lesson. And if I come back into the classroom, I can now be in multiple places at one time. So doing something like guided reading where you have kids in small groups of 6 or whatever it may be, the teacher can now work with a group at a table on some reading strategies, but then have other groups around the room that are watching that same teacher, learning about a different strategy or intervention, or whatever it may be, learning something from the teacher still in that moment, just digitally. And she's working live with that one group, and then they rotate through the room. And so those are those light bulb moments that are going off that I think are really huge. And so that takes me to my final point, which is the final pillar of structures. It's really important then to set up the structures that are needed for teachers to have that time to be able to learn. And so at our school, we were using curriculum cafes, and we would have monthly curriculum cafes where we would work with the helping teachers in the district to look at some different platforms that were out there, or I'd model what I had learned, and then taking it from there to go and try it out in your classroom, come back a month later, and then have people share what they did in the learning and have multiple light bulb moments going off for everybody. I think that's so huge. And I think that's what Mandeep was talking about a few minutes as well, those lunch and learns. Just such a powerful tool to be able to come together, break bread together, so to speak, but learning something together. It really builds a learning culture in a school and is so incredibly important.
Out of necessity, maybe, with what happened this year with, with budgets and a lack of TOCs, and forced us to almost think creatively and to design opportunities that were more responsive to where people were. Like, you're not going to drive 45 minutes to the board office and then 45 minutes home for a session in this age of family and wellness and having to take care of balance in our lives. So how do you honor that as well as an organization? So I know we talked about professional development before, but I think some of the very structures that we implemented, like taking administrators and taking them off-site and going somewhere special, that's different. Like we didn't typically do that before. Or series of lunch and learns where district personnel would come in and do sessions at a school over lunch. That was different. Like we hadn't done that before. But all the feedback to us was that these structures that we were putting into place, these flexible structures and responsive structures, were being successful.
Antonio, as I listen to you talk about some of the structures that we've put in place recently that are different and perhaps aligned to some of the success we've been having around adoption, I do think about the digital coaching initiative that you and others at the district have designed and that we funded for the past couple of years. Because I think as much as we know about learning, we know that there's different ways of learning, but there's nothing really replaces the side-by-side learning and being able to ask questions in an impromptu way.
So for my students, they've had a much more rich collaborative experience thanks to the Office 365 tools. It has supported my learners to inquire, to design, think critically, and reflect together. One really good example that I have from this year was when my students worked on improving their mathematical communication using a strategy that I developed within the Teams application. Students recorded their online meetings in pairs as they shared a particular math application. In our case, I think we used Which One Doesn't Belong. So students were able to view their recorded meetings at a later date, and they use success criteria that I had created for them. Students were able to self-assess their communication skills and their effective use of math language. Finally, after they filled out the success criteria, they each wrote down goals to improve their communication, and then subsequent meetings took place. So the learning and growth was visible. It was reflective and it was collaborative. This is the type of learning by design that wouldn't have come to be without the availability of digital tools such as Office 365.
So for me as a leader, it was allowing opportunities for teachers to learn ways to use these tools so that kids could demonstrate their learning in different ways. And so for me as a leader, it started with me, and I had to do the lead. I had to be the model, to take those risks, like in the assemblies, to say, okay, if I can take this risk with Flipgrid in front of 400 students at a time, then you can do that in a class of 20 and take that same risk. And it's okay if it messes up, it's okay. We're going to get through it together and we're all learning. And that's the big key thing.
Office and Teams was the lifeline for Surrey. Really, when you think about it, we had positioned ourselves in such a way that it was a dramatic shift, to suspension of in-class instruction. But you can just imagine what that might have looked like had that foundation not been in place, right? So I know I did childcare for essential service workers at one of our local schools, and just to see how seamlessly a lot of these kids just said, "Oh, I've got a class meeting at 10 o'clock," and they would just jump on it. And so if it hadn't been that thoughtful approach of, and we could never have foreseen what was going to happen. It's not like we were preparing for the pandemic, but we were prepared for the pandemic. And I think all the things that we've talked about today led us to that point, that thoughtful design of building capacity in all of our users brought us to the point where that transition, though difficult, was made easier.
Going from 5,000 people working in teams on a daily basis to 55,000 people, which has been our journey here in Surrey, it speaks to that there's a lot of activity going on inside of our environment, and it's really actually exciting. And I think another part of that is another way of sort of talking about it or looking at it is maybe there's a couple dozen applications in the Office suite where people are building and curating content and doing various things. But Teams is the exciting piece, really, because it really stitches it all together. And if I think about just my department, and we're just beginning the journey, but we have an opportunity to come together as an entire department, to come together in the teams that we have structured, to collect that data in a spot where we can actually share it out. So we can't all be in the same meetings all the time, but that doesn't mean we can't share information in ways that we haven't been able to historically share it within our department. And I think that makes us a stronger department, and that allows us to leverage thought leadership wherever it is in the organization by having that connecting piece around Teams and the platform.
So in just a short amount of time, Office 365 has helped classroom teachers move from information sorting and academics to connecting, collaborating, and sharing learning amongst teachers, amongst students, and amongst parents as we write our story together.
For me, from an administrative standpoint, I would say as an educational leader, stay curious. Be one of the first to dip your toes in the water and make that visible that you're dipping your toe in the water so that other people see it's going to be okay. And then provide the structures for learning and allow that to not be one-offs, but over time, and keep checking in with people and seeing how they're doing with it. And then create network opportunities for staff as well, where if you see something happening in one class, using a tool, go to that other teacher and say, hey, you got to go check this out. This is going to totally blow your mind.
You know what? There's a lot here, and it can be fairly complicated, but it is absolutely essential to keep your plan simple as possible. For example, in our first year, we defined success as getting as many people as possible to learn how to move their files up into OneDrive. And we stopped there. We didn't stop there, but that was enough to get going and to get people a sense of what's possible. And the point here is pick a topic. It doesn't have to be that one, but it's really important to keep it simple as much as possible as you migrate into this really rich platform of possibilities.
I think I'll just leave with two thoughts. One is to whatever that starting point is, that it is an important intersection of what the tool does and what the work that people need to do. And so I think if you're going to venture into schools and pile on 10 new things that principals and teachers need to do, that will not go well. So I always thought that landing in places of intersections is most healthy, because then you actually decrease a teacher's workload or a principal's workload. You make them more efficient. And then the final thing is what we started with, which is the culture in Surrey, which is one of risk-taking. And I think about Roy Henry Vickers, who I had the privilege to meet a while back. And he just said something that always stuck with me, and that is that sometimes we're so afraid of what might go wrong that we never find out what could go beautifully right. And I think it has gone beautifully right in Surrey. And that's because we've been thoughtful, we've been designers, and we've been responsive to what people need and what they want. And so I'm going to leave it at that. I just want to thank you all for being part of this panel today. Your Twitter handles are being shown under your images right now. So I hope that people will, I hope you're okay that people reach out. And we're just going to stay on board here for 10 or 15 minutes for question and answer. So I appreciate you just staying on board for a few minutes after.